Chapter 5, Lesson 2, Trails to California. All right, so please make sure you have your social studies textbook open to page 206. What I'm going to do is I'm going to just read as if we were reading at in class. And then, I'll stop and kind of review what we've read, okay? All right, Trails to California. Before we go on, the main idea is to read to find out how settlers from the United States traveled to California in the 1840s. Our vocabulary is immigrant, frontier, pioneer, and wagon train. Here we go. Fur trappers were not the only people coming to California. Among the other newcomers were a small number of immigrants. An immigrant is a person who comes from another place to live in a country. Most immigrants worked in the hide and tallow trade or in the fur trade. A few, like Abel Stearns, became Mexican citizens and started ranchos or businesses. Stearns came to California from the United States in 1828. He started a successful trading business in Los Angeles and became the richest person in Southern California. Sutter's Fort. Another immigrant who settled in California was John Augustus Sutter from Switzerland. Sutter left Europe in 1834 after his business there failed. Sutter hoped to make his fortune in North America. He moved from New York City to St. Louis and to Santa Fe and then to Oregon, Hawaii, and Alaska without making much money. In 1839, he reached California. In California, Sutter's luck changed. In 1840, after he became a Mexican citizen, the governor gave him a huge land grant in the Sacramento Valley. The next year, he bought Fort Ross from the Russians. Let's recall, how did you become a Mexican citizen? Remember, anyone could become a Mexican citizen. Only two things you had to do: obey the Mexican laws and follow the Catholic religion, right? And then you could apply for a land grant, which is what John Augustus Sutter did. Sutter started a settlement called New Helvetia, or New Switzerland. At its center, he built a fort with adobe walls, about 15 feet high and 3 feet thick. Those are huge, huge walls. Inside Sutter's fort were several cannons that Sutter had moved there from Fort Ross. Sutter ran a settlement of many workers. He hired mostly Native Americans and Californios, but he also brought some workers from Hawaii, where he had lived. The workers of New Helvetia raised cattle and sheep, grew wheat, wove cloth, and made leather from cattle hides. Sutter also built a mill to grind grain. Sutter's fort was located near the place where the American and Sacramento rivers join. This is where the city of Sacramento is located today. Sutter's fort also stood at the end of several trails crossing the Sierra Nevada. In the 1840s, people from the United States who crossed these mountains found a warm welcome at Sutter's fort. Sutter fed the hungry travelers and hired those who needed jobs to work on his land. He also sold land and supplies to the newcomers. So if you take a look at the picture there, that is, a drawing of what Sutter's fort looked like. Look how huge the walls are. I mean, imagine the people when you come over from, from the east and you see this fort. But thankfully, he let people stay there. He gave them jobs. He let them buy things. So, it was really nice for people to go to his Sutter's Fort. Now, let's just remember that Sutter's Fort will be coming up soon in social studies, but not until a little bit later. All right. And the review question: where was Sutter's Fort? Sutter's Fort was located near where the American and Sacramento rivers join, where is now Sacramento, if you can picture California in your head. So it was very, very north of California. All right. The Bidwell-Bartleson expedition. Sutter built his fort just as more people from the United States were becoming interested in California. These people saw California as a new frontier, a place where they could get plenty of land. A frontier is the land beyond the settled part of a country. Americans who had already settled in California praised the region, right? We all knew this. They loved it. This is beyond all comparison the finest country and the finest climate, wrote rancho owner John Marsh in 1840. Of course, right? California, look at all the things we've learned about it. It's an amazing, amazing land. What we want here is more people. So, people who are already here were like, come on over. Such reports soon brought other pioneers from the United States. A pioneer is one of the first settlers in a place. One of the earliest groups of pioneers to make the overland trip to California from the United States was the Bidwell-Bartleson expedition. In May 1841, a group of about 30 men, women, and children met in Missouri. They chose John Bartleson to lead them. John Bidwell took over later. The Mexican government had warned Americans not to come to California without its permission. However, the pioneers believed that the Mexican government was not strong enough to stop them. So they drove their wagons west along the Oregon Trail and across the Rocky Mountains. The Oregon Trail was the main route pioneers took from Missouri to Oregon, the lands north to California. Why did the Americans think that the Mexican government wasn't strong enough? Remember, we talked about the Mexican government was down in Mexico, in the capital, right? So a lot of the things that happened up here in California, they didn't really know about. And Caroline were like, it's California's part of Mexico, but what they do up there is what they do. So that's why a lot of Americans thought that the Mexican government wasn't strong enough. When the group reached what is today southeastern Idaho, about half of the pioneers decided to go to Oregon. The others turned southwest toward California, so they kind of split. The trail they followed was later called the California Trail. It became the main overland route to California. So whoever took that trail to come to California, that's what they would take. They would go southwest. Day after day, the wagon train rolled on. A wagon train is a group of wagons, each pulled by horses or oxen. In present-day Nevada, the pioneers ran out of food and had to kill their oxen. With no animals to pull their wagons, they had to continue on foot. Can you imagine walking the whole time from Nevada to California? Bidwell knew that his group needed to cross the Sierra Nevada before winter. Deep snow would make the mountains impossible to cross. Luckily, the first snowfall was late that year. In October, the group struggled across the Sierra Nevada. We ate the last of our beef, which is the oxen meat, this evening, Bidwell wrote in his journal. Finally, after weeks of hardships, the tired travelers beheld a wide valley. It was the Central Valley. The pioneers in Bidwell's group were the first settlers from the United States to cross overland into California. Bidwell later founded Chico, a city in the northern Sacramento Valley. So they were the first pioneers in a group of settlers to come into California. So unlike our previous trailblazers, there was a group that first came. All right, John C. Fremont, very important person to California. Pioneers faced hunger, thirst, and sickness on the overland trails. Sometimes they were attacked by Indians who were afraid the settlers would take their lands. But all the hardships and dangers did not stop people from moving to California. The pioneers who traveled to California often followed trails that were first used by trappers, by the ones that we read about. Later, pioneers were also helped by map makers and explorers such as John C. Fremont. So John C. Fremont originally was a map maker and explorer. In 1841, Fremont married Jessie Benton, the daughter of United States Senator Thomas Hart Benton. Senator Benton wanted the United States to expand westward, and so did his new son-in-law, John C. Fremont. Fremont made several journeys to the west, where he drew maps of the land for the United States government. So you can kind of think of John C. Fremont as like the first person to, like the first human GPS, because he's the one that kind of discovered all the trails coming to California, and he made maps. Fremont made several journeys to the west, where he drew maps of the land for the United States government. During the winter of 1843 and 1844, Fremont traveled across the Sierra Nevada to California. He used Carson Pass, named for his guide, Kit Carson. Fremont arrived at Sutter's Fort in March 1844. From there, he traveled south and explored the San Joaquin Valley. Fremont returned home by crossing through a pass in the Tehachapi Mountains. These mountains lie between the Sierra Nevada and the Coast Ranges at the southern end of the San Joaquin Valley. Fremont's wife helped him write a book about his travels. It had much useful information about California. Even more pioneers decided to set out for California after reading this book and others like it. So again, John C. Fremont was a very important person because he first made maps of California, and he made maps of the routes to get to California. And so when he came back, him and his wife, Jessie, made a book. And so after many people read it, they were like, whoa, we want to go to this place. It's so awesome. Let's read the biography about Kit Carson, because he's another important person to California, because remember we talked about Carson Pass in the previous lesson. So Kit Carson, whose real name was Christopher, was born in Kentucky but grew up in Missouri. As a child, he learned how to ride and take care of horses. These skills later helped him become one of the West's best-known trail guides. After guiding John C. Fremont and others to California, Carson moved to New Mexico and later served in the Civil War. Carson City, Nevada is named for him. Very cool, huh? All right, the Donner Party. We talked about the Donner Party a little bit because we read their, remember Patty Reed's doll. So Donner Party, very, very sad, sad thing in history, but it's very important because it shows that no matter what, people still wanted to come to California, no matter what they went through. Okay. All right. So the Donner Party. In May 1846, about 87 men, women, and children left Independence, a city in Missouri. Remember that, 87 men, women, and children. Their leader was George Donner, and the group has come to be known as the Donner Party. Donner's daughter, Liza, later wrote about the journey. She wrote that on the day they left, our people were in the best of spirits. The children rode horses with the breeze playing through our hair. Of course, they were very excited, right? I mean, who wouldn't be excited to go on this journey with so many men, women, and children, and you're on these wagon trains, and you're kind of, going together and having fun. So yes, of course, their spirits were very, very high. By summer, however, the journey had become difficult. The weather was hot and the water was very hard to find. In July, the Donner Party decided to take a shortcut they had read about in a book, Emigrant's Guide to Oregon and California. This book had been written by Lansford Hastings, a guy who had never been on this shortcut. That shortcut turned out to be a terrible mistake. It led the group over ground so rough that it took nearly a month longer to go that way. So someone in the Donner Party read this book from Lansford Hastings that was, it talked about a shortcut, but he had never even taken that shortcut. So they all decided, let's take that shortcut. It's going to get us to California faster. But it actually turned out to be a really bad decision because it actually took them a month longer to even reach California. The Donner Party did not reach the Sierra Nevada until November. What happens in November? It's winter. And a heavy snowfall trapped them in the mountains. One member of the group, Patrick Breen, described the snow. He wrote in his journal, "Snowing fast, looks as likely to continue as when it commenced, which was started. No living thing without wings can get about," meaning if you don't have wings and you can't fly, then you can't even get through that snow. The people quickly built huts near what is today Donner Lake and sent the strongest members of their party through the deep snow to get help. However, the Donner Party suffered terribly. More than 30 men, women, and children died before help finally reached the group in February. The survivors were taken to Sutter's Fort. So they sent the strongest members to go get some help. And so what they did is they decided to kind of bunker down and say, all right, we're going to let's wait here until the people come back with help, because they obviously, they're up in this really rough part of the Sierra Nevada. It's snowing. And, they ran out of food. I'm sure they had to kill their oxen. And after they ate that, it just took them, they weren't able to really a lot of them weren't able to survive. So unfortunately, 30 men, women, and children died. And the rest, when they finally survived it, they were taken into Sutter's Fort. Let's read a quick biography on Eliza Donner. Eliza Donner was one of the youngest members of the Donner Party. Her parents died during the trip, so Eliza, along with her older sister Georgia, was taken in by a Swiss couple from Sutter's Fort. She went to school in Benicia and Sacramento, and in 1861 she married Sherman Houghton. In 1911, Eliza wrote a book about the Donner Party called The Expedition of the Donner Party and Its Tragic Fate. If you want to learn more about the Donner Party, it's very interesting. So now you are going to do lesson 2 review. So let's read those questions now. Number 1, what was the name of John Sutter's settlement? It says it, if you go back, it is on page 206. Number 2, recall the main idea. How did settlers from the United States reach California in the 1840s? How did they do it? What did they take? Okay. They took an overland trail. Mrs. Romero just gave me the answer. All right, think critically. These ones, there's no right or wrong answer. This is your opinion. So what do you think? Number 3, why do you think hardships did not stop pioneers from coming to California? Why do you think that? Why do you think that no matter what, little water, no food, why do you think they came over? And number 4, imagine that you were in Missouri in 1841. Would you have joined the Bidwell-Bartleson expedition? Explain. Would you have joined, or would you have said, I'm cool, stay in Missouri? Or would you be like, yes, I want to go to California? So go ahead and work on that. That's your homework. All right, and that is lesson 2, Trails to California.